Hello and welcome to episode 21 of 11FS Spotlight. I'm Sarah Kocianski. In this weekly show, we shine a spotlight on the best and the brightest in the tech and financial services industries to try and understand what gets them going, growing, and what they think the future of the industry will look like. Today's show is brought to you by MyTech, digital identity verification that's trusted the world over. Secure more high-value customers while reducing risk and costs with MyTech, a global leader and enterprise partner in identity verification technology. On today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by Syra Rah-mon, Vice President of Finance at HMBradley. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm excited to have a conversation.
I know, it's nice to talk to somebody and see your face. Happens rarely these days. So today we're going to be talking about female VCs and female founders. I think pretty much everybody knows there's still a very prominent gender gap, both within the world of VCs, but also amongst founders. Do join us though for our virtual event, our first virtual event of 2021, After Dark Open Finance, Fact or Fantasy? Open finance is still a pretty new concept, but what opportunities and risks does it present? Find out how your business can leverage open finance as we bust some of the biggest myths about this trend at our After Dark event on the 17th of March. Stay tuned for some of the guests who'll be joining us and register now to save your spot for free at bit.ly/After Dark Open Finance. So a big part of this show is your involvement and your questions. So leave them in the comments sidebar and we'll be answering them for you today. Right, so let's start off by getting to know you a little bit because I've introduced you and then talked about something completely different. So for those who don't know you, could you give us a little bit of an intro to you and your role at HMBradley?
Absolutely. So HMBradley is a neobank here in the US, and I am the VP of Finance. So I handle all things that have to do with the stuff going on in the background in terms of our numbers behind our products. And our primary product is our deposit, which we live on the thesis that not all deposits are created equal. So we offer different interest rates based upon the percentage that any given person saves of their direct deposit into our account. And then we also have a credit card product that enhances our deposit product as well.
I actually think your model is super interesting. That's an aside from today's conversation, but the way that you work out the interest rates and deposits, that's like one of the most interesting new models I've seen in a while. So I actually wrote about it for a piece a while ago. So I'm keen. I like it. I like what you guys are doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, so that's one part of what you do, but you're also an LP investor in the Female Founders Alliance. So what's that? Is that another job? Is that a side hustle? What does that involve you doing?
Yeah, so I have been a huge fan of Lindsay Fenzig, who is the general partner of the Female Founders Alliance, and they focus on underrepresented and female-founded entities. And she just kind of approached me and asked me if I was interested. And I have been angel investing for a little over a year now. And I just kind of couldn't resist because I have just been in finance for so long. I've watched the statistics. I've also watched so many women try to raise money and struggle compared to men. So, I felt like it was the best way to put my money where my mouth is by supporting other women that need that support and need people to focus on having the diversity, not only on the founder base, but also on the funding side.
Absolutely. It's important to have, both sides of that equation, the representation in both sides of that equation. We've talked a little bit about, the lack of women in the VC space and a lack of women in the founding space as well. So how did you get to where you are? What inspired you? Was it a really difficult journey? What was, without going too much into kind of like a deep and meaningful, back history, just what you'd like to share with us, I guess, about how you got there.
Yeah, so I was originally a derivatives on a derivatives trade desk, selling derivatives to regional and community banks. And my experiences were repeatedly the same. I was consistently one of the only women in the room. I was certainly the only woman of color in the room. And it was a struggle for me. And I realized that over time, it wasn't a place that was helpful for women to succeed. So I felt like I was struggling to succeed because of the fact that I was not only a woman, but a woman of color. And I felt like it was harder for others to succeed despite people claiming that they were going to have diversity and inclusion. So it kind of formed the foundation of who I became going forward, in terms of needing to support other women and needing to support other people of color. I think it's the only way to help is by becoming that leader that a lot of people don't see higher up the totem pole.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard for anybody to think, oh, that's what I might want to do in the future, if they don't see anybody that looks like them or sounds like them or has their life experiences up there, I guess.
Yeah, and that was kind of my struggle growing up. It was really hard for me to look around and not see anyone that looked like me. And then it was even harder because there came a point in my life where I was contemplating having a child, and I realized not a single one of my mentors could possibly understand the concept of working 6 days a week and traveling every single day while being pregnant. So yeah, that's definitely become the foundation for me is having the ability to turn to colleagues and people that are junior to me and say, if you ever need to have a conversation, if you're ever contemplating something that you find is difficult, like I'm here to have that conversation with you and be that leader for you. So that's definitely a big piece of what goes on in my mind.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it's amazing that you decided that's what you were going to do and you achieved it. So let's bring the conversation around to talking about female VCs. So what does the gender division currently look like in the VC world?
The last study that I took a look at talked about 11% of VC partners being women, which is just absolutely insane considering how our population exists today. And only 13% of VC dollars go towards female founders, which is also crazy to me considering how many incredible female founders exist. So both of those things combined it just made sense to me to start contributing and saying, women are creating equally powerful products, and it doesn't make sense to me why there's a different conversation going on at the table with women than with men. So, and I think by changing that, by saying I'm going to start contributing specifically and intentionally towards underrepresented and female founders, I think that's how you start shifting the needle in their favor.
Absolutely. Why do you think that division exists? I mean, we've talked a little bit about it. Partly it will be perhaps that women don't see other women investing. It doesn't perhaps appeal to them as a career choice because they don't know they can do it. Is that it, or is there something else underlying it?
I definitely think that's part of it. It's something that I contemplated a lot. So coming from an immigrant family that didn't have, where my parents came from, there wasn't an investing arm. I'm now familiar with some of the venture capital that goes on in Bangladesh, which is where my family's from, but it's very, very new to that country. I don't think that women are raised with this mentality of investing. I think it's something that they weren't necessarily told. When I look back on my family, my father was the primary, wallet and man who handled the person that handled the finance, despite the fact that my mom was the breadwinner in our family. So I think there was a cultural shift over the course of the last couple of decades where women started to really grow and foster their wealth. And I think that that's slowly changing into our favor, but it wasn't something that we were raised doing. So that's definitely something that I think needs to change. And it's certainly, for what it's worth, the reason that I have a podcast where I talk about helping women invest in finance, because I think it's so important to educate and help promote financial literacy to people that don't necessarily have that background.
Yeah, it's fascinating because in large parts of the world throughout history, women have actually managed the household money, in terms of how much do we spend on food that's going to keep us alive? How much do kids cost? How much are school shoes? That kind of stuff. Women manage that, but then somehow they get sort of left behind when we talk about the more formal financial instruments. And it's I think it's shocking that's happened, but I think it sounds like more women are coming to grips with the idea that, yeah, there's more they could do with their funds and I suppose make them work for them. Do you see a growing appetite from women to not only invest, but to take it that next step further and I suppose almost become professional investors, if that's what we would call VC?
Yeah, I think as more doors start to open for them, it's definitely happening. I think the numbers are starting to shift in favor for women to be able to do that. You know, there was this incredible essay that I read about the revolving door, which is where extremely ambitious women go into a financial institution to work for them, and then they get swung right back out as soon as they want to have a family or they're seeking something in addition to their job. They get pushed right back out because they don't have the capacity to have essentially two jobs, one at home and then one in the workplace. And I think that probably really lowered the number of women that could climb the ladder and get to the boardroom and get to the C-suite. And I think now that we're starting to have a little bit more parity between parenting for both men and women, I think that's starting to shift in their favor. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm hoping the shift changes personally.
Do you give any credence to or buy into this idea that women don't invest because they're more risk averse? You hear both sides of this story. I just wondered from your experience, both with what you've done, but also working with working with other female investors. Do you find that to be true, or is it more about people just don't know it's a thing, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I will tell you that I was probably one of the riskiest people on the trade desk back when I was working on one. So I don't know that I obviously have a bias because of that. So I don't know if that's true. If there's an inherent, I guess I would be more curious to read studies about that, because from my perspective, I haven't ever felt that way. I just think that there is, rather than using the word risk, perhaps a little bit more planning. I have always been a planner in terms of my assets and in terms of my wealth. I always have a trajectory in my mind, whereas I think there's just a different mentality perhaps in the market, particularly right now, in terms of investing, that where you see traders that entered the market post 2011 and they're just much more aggressive, they're much more bullish. And I think it's because we've been in a bull market for so long. It's a conversation that I continue to have with people, which is that I learned to play the long game because I entered the market in 2008. I faced immense amounts of losses when I first entered the market at that point in my life. Whereas I think a lot of people that have recently entered into the market are probably less risky. And I don't know that that's gender-based, because I'm starting to see a lot of my female friends that are entering the market attempt to do the same things that my male friends are doing.
So that's more about, I suppose, trends in investing generally rather than a gender-based trend, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So what is there anything else that you think we need to do to get more women into investing? Because obviously you have to start by getting into investing, and then you can move up the ladder into more professional investing and bigger scale investing. I agree with what you're saying about needing role models, like needing to see women out there investing. Is there something educational that you think needs to happen? What else? I mean, I guess maybe what could VCs, firms do, or what could even the investment platforms and companies do to try and get more women into it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's actively seeking out women, right? So it's intentionally looking for people that are underrepresented within your niche. And I don't think it's just about putting people into leadership positions, because you don't just want to put a woman into a leadership position because she's a woman. You want to put her there because she deserves it, and because she's a leader. But simultaneously, I think there's just so much more. It's opening up the floodgates and making sure that there's parity for women within any given firm. So that's making sure you have an excellent maternity or paternity leave. That's making sure that women feel like they're represented in all different arms of the company, whether it's a VC firm or any other type of company. And then it's also, if you're a VC, actively seeking out firms that have better diversity. So if it's one thing that I've learned, having the ability to examine companies in a way that success is actually tied to diversity. So the more diverse a company is, I've seen the better they tend to perform as well, because they have a wider umbrella of thought leadership underneath them. So I don't know. I'm curious to see more studies that'll come out that show the different types of diversity within each entity. And I think VCs need to start actively presenting their diversity, not only in their own portfolios, but asking for that diversity on the cap table before they invest. So I think that twofold method will probably help accelerate a little bit more parity across the board.
Yeah, and I think the point is that there's plenty of evidence out there that says that more diverse companies do better. They just perform better, you know. And it doesn't have to be gender diversity. It's more. Sorry, yeah.
No. Sorry, continue.
No, yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I mean, you would think, therefore, that it would make sense to VCs to look for that within a company that they're going to invest in. Like, is there diversity of thought here? Is there a diversity of background? Because, I mean, I think it would benefit the VCs, right? It would benefit the whole industry.
Absolutely. It's going to benefit the VCs. It's going to benefit the companies that are creating that diverse workforce that gives different people different perspectives. And then simultaneously, something that I've seen, having a diverse board. So when I see board members that are women or people of color, they have such impressive perspective that's usually completely different from someone else. Some of the most beneficial perspective that I've seen on either the boards that I've sat on or boards that I've reported to, they tend to come from the underrepresented aspect, because they think, honestly, they just think from such a different angle than everyone else that has been sitting on that board. So it's something that I definitely encourage anyone that's contemplating that diversity is a huge asset.
And how about, you know, from the founders' side? I mean, I guess, you know, we need to get more women, perhaps. I mean, I don't know, actually. Maybe, what are your thoughts on this? Are there not enough women becoming founders, or is there just not enough support for the women founders out there that makes them look invisible? Because I haven't looked at the data myself, but I feel like there are plenty, particularly at the moment, there are plenty of new businesses being started by women. Lots of amazing things for a lot of women, perhaps, who've lost their jobs. Women have been much harder hit than men by economic downturns off the back of the pandemic. And we've seen so many resourceful women start businesses at home, whether that's candle making or their own accountancy company, or, you know, whatever it might be. So do you think there aren't enough women wanting to be founders? Or do you think it's just the founders there aren't getting enough support to grow and you know, become leaders of bigger businesses?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and I actually think it's bifurcated. So I think there's a lack of funding going to women in general because of biases by VCs, and then I simultaneously think that there's not enough support for women that want to go into. So I do agree with you for what it's worth. I do think that more women were able to start businesses. I also think there was a horrible article that said in December of 2020, it was shown that tons of women lost their jobs because of the pandemic, and they were extremely underemployed, particularly women of color. And it was devastating for me to read, because it's just further proof to me that women are trying so hard to break into different industries, and they're struggling because they end up being the caretaker of the family as well. And that ends up taking priority over their careers, which is a perfectly fine decision to have. But also having that co-parenting and having additional support at home is so critical for a female founder who wants to start a company. So I just think about all of those female founders that wanted to start in 2020 that probably had to take a back seat so that they could take care of their families instead.
Yeah, no, that's very true. There's been a couple of articles in the major press over here in the UK in the last few weeks talking about how men have suddenly realized how hard it is to have a child and try and work at the same time. And you sort of think, oh dear, okay. I mean, there's some progress there.
And honestly, that's something that I really respect about VCs like Leslie. She has had multiple calls where she just has her baby on her hip. And frankly, I think that just needs to be normalized, because I think to myself, if I want to have a child in the next 5 years, or really if any female founder wants to be able to have that work-life balance, I think that that's something that just needs to become part of a cultural, like something that's culturally acceptable, is having that ability to be able to be a mom, but also be a founder and not be judged for either one.
And actually that might help on the other side as well, if it becomes normalized to be a parent and a successful founder, then dads might feel that they can spend more time with their kids, or bring their kids onto calls as well. It could actually benefit everybody, I suppose.
Absolutely, and that's exactly how I feel about it. Some of the best founders that I've seen usually have their kids strapped to their chest, and that's males and females. So, I mean, frankly, the world has been blended between work from home and actually being home with your family. My dog tends to cross my screen on a regular basis, so I just can't. I don't know. I just think it needs to be a little bit more normalized that we do have lives outside of our jobs, and it's okay to have a family and also be successful in the workplace.
I mean, and hopefully that message will kind of be hammered home, I suppose, by the last 12 months. When we start to go back into perhaps a more normal, or at least a more predictable situation where we haven't got lockdowns coming left, right, and centre, what would you like to see kind of coming from the fintech industry to help get more women into to roles and to founding roles? Is there anything that you think the industry should be doing? So, HMBradley, do you run webinars on telling people how to? Well, your podcast tells people that what you've done and how to get into it. What else do you think that the industry needs to do to help get women in there and help encourage women to start founding companies?
Yeah, I think there's like a basic encouragement, and it's not just mentorship of women. I think that there's this line, right, where mentorship is great, and supporting a woman is great, but I think there's this additional, I want to also fund them. So don't just mentor those women, offer them money, tell them, like, I like your idea, rather than, I guess I consistently see a female presenting something and a male presenting something, and then the male ends up winning. And in my mind, it's a matter of how do you financially support the female, rather than just saying you're going to offer them mentorship, and then simultaneously just hiring more women in general. So, and like I said, that's not just in the upper tiers where I think people are focusing on right now. I think that's at every single level of every single organization. Giving women the same opportunities that men have. So rather than focusing on females in HR, put them in the riskier sides of, finance and fintech. So yeah, I guess from my perspective, it's aggressively hiring at least a 50-50 on a 50-50 basis, and then simultaneously making sure that women that want to be female founders are getting funded correctly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that's a huge thing, and I remember chatting to my colleague Sam Moore podcast a while ago about and this was to do with funding minority-owned businesses, but they were saying, we are fed up of mentorship programs giving money.
Yes, exactly. You know what, mentorship is free. Give them the funding.
Exactly.
Their ideas are phenomenal, and they're usually extremely thoughtful in terms of diversity and inclusion as well. So rather than making the bold statement of we support diversity and inclusion, fund it. Give them the inclusivity that they so deserve.
Yeah, and I suppose, what else? Is there anything else that the VCs? I mean, other than VC companies, other than hiring more diverse people within, like to have more diverse VCs in a VC company, if that makes sense, that will help diversify the portfolio. Is there anything else you think VC companies need to be doing? Because obviously, if the VC companies are investing in more women, then it helps even things out. Is there anything else that you would like to see?
Yeah, I think it's also just examining the portfolio and specifically asking every single entity that they're giving money to, like, what is your ratio? Show me your employee stack. Show me that you're hiring women and promoting women at the same rate that you're hiring men and promoting men. There are plenty of products out there now that actually analyze all of this for you. So I'm trying to recall the name of this entity out of Seattle that actually takes your payroll and the genders and tells you what the wage gap is at your specific company. I mean, we have the tools now to figure out how to close the wage gap and how to make sure that we're bringing parity to the industry. So it should be a primary focus for every single company, and I don't mean just fintech, I mean in every single branch of the startup world.
Yeah, I think that also firms need to be aware that they're going to be held accountable. Like, people are going to start asking them questions like, what is your gender pay gap? Here in the UK, certain companies actually have to publish that by law. They have to tell you.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's only big companies, and they can do very clever things with their numbers and accounting. But there is a move towards that. And I think companies just kind of need to realize that their customers are going to start holding them accountable. And I think perhaps, with HMBradley, perhaps as a brand, you have to, maybe you agree with this, but you have to have your values and live by them, because your customers will hold you to account if you don't.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think you have to be able to prove that you're putting your actual money where your mouth is. So, and I think that that's something that people should actively be asking as well when they're going in for interviews. Like, if you're a woman, you want to see what that executive leadership looks like. You want to see what the board looks like, because someday you want to be on that board potentially, or you want to be in that executive leadership. So it really works in both directions. And I think the more active that people are and the harder they seek out that parity, the faster it'll come to that parity. So absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, that's quite a positive note. So let's leave it there. We're coming up to the end of the show now. So thank you so much, Saira, for joining me. This has been a brilliant conversation. Where can people find out more about you and everything you're getting up to? Where can they find your podcast, or your YouTube, or your LinkedIn, or Twitter, whatever?
Awesome. So you can find me at Syra Rah-mon, so just my full name, on Twitter. I tend to put quite spicy tweets out every so often. Otherwise, our podcast can be found at girlsjustwanna.com. So that's the other place that you can find us if you are interested in checking out the podcast.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much again. But that's all we have time for this week. Do make sure you follow 11FS on LinkedIn so you never miss an episode. Spotlight will be back next Thursday. So have a great weekend, and goodbye.